Welcome to episode 8.
8.
We've been doing this 8 times, huh?
Let's go.
That's good. Of the Winning Team Podcast. I am LaTanya.
And I'm Eugene.
And we the winning team.
And we are the winning team.
Yay.
Yay.
So listen, y'all. Eugene did a thing.
What'd I do?
I'm about to tell the people.
I know.
Okay. So he did a thing a couple weeks ago. And planned a date really weekend.
I'm not a planner.
At all. He hates it, but he's married to a planner who has taught him well. And so he did an amazing job. And it was something that was out of the norm of what we would normally do. Because a date night for us is usually, let's go get something to eat. Mm-hmm. And that's about it. And maybe the movies.
Yeah. And
then that's about it. And I'm not saying that's it in a bad way, but that's usually what it consists of. But this go around, he said, "Oh, we're gonna do a whole weekend," and that weekend consisted of a marriage conference. And so, y'all, in the 21 years that we have been married, we've never, ever went to a marriage conference.
No.
Never. And that is usually something that I would probably say, let's go to a marriage conference, husband. And he would say maybe or reluctantly.
Probably wouldn't say nothing. I'd probably just go.
That probably would be it right there. But for this one, he planned the entire weekend. So it was local. It was a local conference. And we stayed out in Oak Brook, which isn't too far from us. And it was just an amazing weekend. So it's offered through Family Life. The conference was offered through Family Life, and it's called A Weekend to Remember. And y'all, it was a weekend to remember. So good job, husband.
Thank you, babe.
So it wasn't just, and so we could have easily gotten back in our car and drove the 30 minutes back home, but we stayed the entire weekend. We stayed at a hotel. It was at a hotel. So we stayed the entire weekend and really made it a weekend to remember with some great date nights. So after the conference, there was some nights that we went out on some dates to some really great restaurants. So stay tuned for that.
I know I planned those too, y'all.
He did, y'all. All of it. I was so happy and so proud of my husband.
Thanks,
so good job, husband. So
Thank
just continue that. Okay, you've started it.
No, this is
now.
This is it for the year.
But now for the whole year.
Weekend.
Okay, the year, huh?
I did 2 nights and
You
a
did.
weekend.
You did an amazing.
I was tired.
You did an amazing job. And so if Family Life, now let me say this: we do not work for Family Life.
Not at all.
We are not getting a commission from Family Life. None of that. But if this comes through your city, we highly, highly recommend going. This is money well invested into your marriage, because marriage is an investment. You're going to probably hear us say that a few times today, but we want to just kind of give you all a recap of really what we got from it. And even being married 21 years, this was something for me. It was eye-opening to marriage. I think even just allowing me to look at marriage differently. And not that it was we going to this marriage conference because we need to get one another right. We need to fix you, you need to fix me. And even when we started to tell people that we were going to this marriage conference, people started looking side-eyed at us y'all good? And yeah, we're good. We're making an intentional investment into our marriage. And so we just want to go through some of the points that we think were just so powerful for the weekend for us, but highly, highly recommend if this comes through your city.
Yes, please do.
Please do.
Yourself a favor.
Let me tell you this. So let me just give you just a real a synopsis, an overview of what it was. So there were literally 500 couples there, y'all. 500. So that meant 1,000 people.
More than 1,000.
More than 1,000. Yeah. So right. So it's probably over 500 couples that were in this room. And so when we heard that, I know for me, when I heard that, I was like, how really impactful is this going to be with 500 people in the room? Listen.
1,000 people.
1,000 people, right. With 1,000 people in the room. And when I tell you there were people who were like engaged, to people who have been married for like 2 months, to people who have been married for 54 years.
Yeah.
That were in that room. So this is not just for like newlyweds because they got to figure this all out. Nah, y'all. Because again, we've been married 21 years and we walked away from there so enriched, so much, I think just better because it just gave us another way to look at marriage. So in knowing all of this, and you did the planning for all of this, like what prompted you to want to say, let's do this weekend to remember?
That's a good question. And honestly, I'm going to say, shout out to their marketing team because I saw it first on social media. Mm-hmm. And, I go past stuff on social media and sponsorships all the time. But when I saw this, I was like, it's like, what is this? Mm-hmm. And so the beautiful part even about the weekend is that I know I didn't know what to expect. And so we didn't know what to expect coming in, but I think we went into the weekend with a spirit of expectation, like, you know what, we're going to work on this because funny how you said everybody was wondering, was something going on in our marriage whenever we said when you told them that that's what we were doing. But one of the first things that they said is that maintenance is better than repair.
That was so good.
And so that statement,
good.
I'm like, yes, because that's exactly the reason why I felt like we were going. And when you think about your car, what happens if you don't do the standard preventative maintenance on your car, the standard preventative maintenance on your house? But let's just stick to the car. If you don't get your oil changed in your car, eventually the car is not going to run well. If you don't rotate your tires or get new tires, if you don't change the transmission fluid, if you don't change all of the fluids and spark plugs, et cetera, the standard maintenance in your car, eventually that car is going to break down. And if the car breaks down and you don't have, I'll just stick with the warranty. If you don't, not warranty, but if you didn't do the preventative maintenance and the car breaks down, it's going to cost you so much more to repair. So for me, what I was thinking about is, this could be a good thing because we're getting, we pray and thank God for the people who come to us and that we pour out to. But sometimes you got to sit and be poured back into.
Yes.
And so I felt like it was a good opportunity for us to not just based on what we read and, how we talk to one another and, other couples that we're with. This was an opportunity for us to get away, to unplug, and to just sit and be ministered to.
Absolutely.
And so I really enjoyed it. And the other thing is that, I'm not a paper person. And so I have this workbook in front of me, but I kind of started to complain about this workbook when we first got there.
Before we even got
started. Because I
don't
like to write. I don't like to write. I want electronic.
I want to type it. I'm like, you already going into the weekend. This not going to be a weekend to remember if you're going in like this,
so
bruh.
I had to check myself and say, Eugene, be present and fully engage in the weekend. So I put my phone on do not disturb. And so, scriptures tell us that faith without works is dead. So it'll work if you work it.
Yeah.
And so you had to put in the work. And so it was a phenomenal opportunity for us to come together, to be fully engaged. And I really sincerely enjoyed the weekend. So just to jump in a little bit. So the weekend was really about oneness and God's goal and God's vision for marriage. And his intent was really around a couple being one, working together as a team. But then you have the enemy who is doing everything in his power to push us toward isolation. And so what happened is that we should, in a marriage, should always be facing one another and always in tune to one another. And then he talked about how the enemy, because again, it's not your spouse. That's the key thing. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but you got to understand that the enemy of your marriage, just like Adam and Eve back in the Garden of Eden, it wasn't Adam versus Eve. It was the enemy coming in to get in the way of them becoming one. And so the enemy wants to push you toward isolation. And so he wants you to move through life married, but not together. And that was a point that was amazing to me. And so it talked about, just initially to start, is that we long to experience oneness, and we do that by trusting one another. We overcome struggles together. We get to know one another as well as we can so that we can love one another and accept each other as for who we are. You know, she wants to know that I have her back and she has mine. I am my best self when I'm with her. That's how you want it to feel when we are with one another, that we understand that we're unstoppable together, that we're known, but that we're loved, we're hopeful. She gets me, I get her, and that we're romantic and that we're intimate, and we have hope because we feel like our best years are ahead of us. But when you start moving toward isolation, you start having different thoughts about your relationship. And they talked about how you start getting a feeling of hopelessness. You start thinking about that, silence becomes the conversation. When you start to think about there's no intimacy and there's no sex in your marriage, and you feel like your best years are behind you, and then y'all never actually really resolve arguments. You even could feel invisible in your marriage, and even really start to think about yourselves as roommates more than a married couple. And you feel stuck and you feel unloved and you feel like you're married to a stranger. And that's when you know that you have moved toward isolation and that the enemy is actually winning in your marriage. And the one last thing I'll say, and I'll throw it back over to you, is that again, we're supposed to be facing one another. And what are the things that the enemy does to make you turn away from your spouse? Because when you're one, you're facing each other. And I know we'll get into it later, but I know the enemy has done many, many things, and he has found his way in where he makes me turn away from you. And this weekend caused me to understand those moments and not even allow it to happen even for a second.
Yeah. I think that was that oneness and isolation. I never really thought about it in that context. I think when we talk about marriage, or when it's talked about marriage, when others are talking about, even with us, you talk about cleaving, and you talk about, in Christian terms, that you leave your parents' house and you come together as one. And I think in society often kind of teaches against that, even in marriage, like, oh, you can still be yourself, you can still be this, you can still be, you don't have to listen to what they have to say, you don't have to, and so those are those distractions, or those things that I think the enemy can begin to put that wedge in between it, because we're often in this space of what is God saying about our marriage, but every day we engage in the world every day that's saying something different, that's giving messages that are different. And so for me, that idea of oneness and isolation was pretty eye-opening for me, and really made me begin to think about, what does that look like for us over 21 years. And I think one of the things that they said is that no marriage is static. So like, you're going to be on some spectrum, ideally, of this oneness and isolation throughout your marriage. And it's the intentionality to get you back to the oneness, because isolation is easy. Like, it's easy to drift apart. And I was even thinking about what causes that. And for me, one of the analogies that came up was rhythm versus routine. And so, when you think about a rhythm, when it comes to music, it's a beat. You can feel it. You move with it. You moving at the same time, and it's almost like an experience experience. You really become one with the music. You become one with the person you might be dancing with when you're in rhythm with one another. But then I think what happens is life happens.
Yeah.
Which then means life for me means that routine. So especially if you have like kids in the mix, and I can honestly say that probably is one of the things that probably has caused some isolation, not our kid himself, but the routine of what needed to be done for him, because he needed routine. And so that routine, it becomes about the thing that you just don't think about. And so that becomes the rhythm of your marriage, because it now is like, I ain't think about this. We in this routine. We wake up, we go to school, we go do this, we do this, and we back at it again. And so you don't feel it. You don't, you know it, but that's all you do. You know, you're not being intentional around it. You're not growing it. I just need to get through this, the routine of the day. And we say that. We say that so often, like, just let me get through the routine of the day. And so we even begin to speak that. That's the life that I think you're even giving to your marriage. And so then when it's before you looked up, and now the routine has gotten you drifted away from the person that you're supposed to be in rhythm with, then that becomes the issue. So that is really what I began to think about. And I think now, even now after this conference, I've been more intentional, or wanting to be more intentional around our rhythm, and not just doing a routine. Because when we don't like to do routine things. When you really think about it, like, nobody likes to go to the dentist. You need to go to the dentist because that's your dental routine.
It's maintenance.
No, it's maintenance. Nobody wants to go to the doctor, but if you want good health and you want, to live a long life, you go to the doctor. That's the routine. Nobody likes routines, but I think if you don't go to feeling it, going back to now, like, let me get a rhythm with it. I don't even think that's what I was going to say all the way.
That's all right. But I think I understand what you were saying.
But, so nobody likes those things, but how do you now get back to breaking so much of the routine? Now, I do think routines are important, so I don't want to take that away from it. But now, how do you feel in that routine? How do you get a rhythm even in the routine of things, so that you are doing these check-ins and you are trying to make sure that you're breaking up the monotony of what life will have for you? Yeah,
I agree. And I think in that you have to be known and you have to be loved. And I think what happens is that in the midst of the rhythms and the routines, you still have a feeling about it. You still have an emotion about it. You still have, life happening to you as an individual, because I think it absolutely is okay. And I love the analogy of a dance, because sometimes you dance by yourself and that's perfectly okay. But then there's times when we are dancing together, and then we still have to have a rhythm in order to be able to vibe with one another. And so what happens is that life does happen, and it disrupts that rhythm and the routine. And how will you as a couple, well, let me back up. How will you as individuals respond to that disruption and still try to do everything in your power to make sure that you maintain the rhythm, even though you have a disruption? I love this quote from Sydney Harris. She said, it's in our workbook, almost no one is foolish enough to imagine that he automatically deserves great success in any field of activity. Yet almost everyone believes that he automatically deserves success in marriage. Almost no one is foolish enough to imagine that he automatically deserves great success in any field, yet almost everyone believes that he automatically deserves success in marriage. And I think that that's so true, is because marriage works if you work it. And so when disruptions happen, we talk about for better or worse, but how will you handle the worst?
Yeah, that worst is is important, and
It
how you
is.
handle that.
Because we only often think about the good things and good times in marriage.
Absolutely. And how it makes you feel, like this happily ever after. But what happens when happy leaves, like the next day, after you didn't have the ceremony, you had all of these things, what happens in the for better or worse moments. One of the other things that I think they talked about that was really good for me, because I can probably pinpoint, even in the beginning part of our marriage, I probably had a little bit of this in me. Probably still got a little bit of this in me. But it was, did you just shake your head?
I did.
They talked about a me marriage. So it's what are my expectations and my hopes and my dreams. And my spouse doesn't always cooperate with a me marriage. And so, like, if we being real, like, we probably operate in that space a lot.
You said we?
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. He an only child. I'm an only child. We have a whole lot of me moments in this here marriage. But guess what we've done? We've learned how to get in the rhythm of these only children, because we interested. But I thought that was so interesting to know that you really do, even in your trying to be conscious of the other person, that me marriage, like me, mine, that can get in the way and begin to cause some of the isolation,
100%.
That can happen as well. And so, again, that was one of those, like, eye-opening things for me in terms of, all right, how does that show up, and how has that caused isolation, I think even for us. And I think it probably has at some point. And I think it may, again, as we're on this journey, it may come up again. But I also think now we have better tools.
We do. And I think this book, this weekend, it affirms so much that we have been doing that has caused us to be successful over 21 years. But as you said, it gave us clear language, because communication is really necessary to put us on the path toward oneness. And so I believe that they gave us phenomenal illustrations and graphs and charts when we are talking about the goal of communication, and is to build oneness as you're sharing basically who you are. And there are 5 levels that they talked about in regards to communication that I absolutely loved. And these are really, the levels can be indicators of where you are in your relationship. And so level 1, they talked about, because what really you want to get to a level 5, which is really where you're being transparent and sharing all that you are. But level 1, when you're in level 1 and you're communicating, you can know that, because level 1 is cliches. So you're really not sharing, but you just say, hey, how was your day? Oh, my day was,
amazing.
It was blessed and highly favored. That's that. You're just saying cliche statements, and you're not really getting down to the to being, of course, the goal of transparency. Level 2, they talked about, you just share facts. You're really just sharing what you know. And many couples live here where you just kind of talk about the facts of your day. I went to work. I talked to my boss. My boss said this. I said this back. The kids' routine. You're just really focused on all of the facts in your life. But level 3 is when you get to opinion, when you're actually sharing what you think about all of the facts and all of the things that you're actually going through. Whether or not you like it, you don't like it, because that's when you actually start to share your opinion. And then you get into the point of emotions, which is level 4, where you're talking about how that actually made you feel. So you can have a fact, but do you like or not like it, which is your opinion, and then how does it make you feel, and does your spouse even receive what you're actually saying when you're sharing it? And then, of course, after you get done with your emotions, you move to the point of transparency, where you're sharing of who you are. And I often say, I cannot remember who said this, but my goal is always to get the person who knows me the best to love me the most. because that's when you know that you're to the point of being transparent where you are, is that I am completely open and transparent. I'm sharing with you not only the facts of my day, how I felt about even what you said to me, how I thought about that. I'm sorry, the opinion of how I thought about it, even how something made me feel. But then I'm sharing everything with you. And then that way we don't avoid transparency for the fact of just trying to get along. And I want you to feel safe, and I want to feel safe to be able to share in that way.
Where do you think we land in this? Like, what, maybe even now? Where do you think?
Well, what was interesting is, as I was looking at, this level, it's not even about now. I'll talk about now in a second, but I know that there was a season of our life where we lived in the fact stage.
Absolutely.
And it was just about sharing what I know and caught up in the routine of our lives about who was going to pick him up, who was going to pick Mike up, who was going, what's on your calendar for tomorrow. And then it's just like you're just talking through the mundane of the routine.
Yeah.
And, for us, we start to feel like, wait a minute, like, this is not normal. We understand that there's no feeling and emotion in this. And so I thank God that we were in a space where we would do self-regulation. It's like, hey, man, let me check in. Are you good? And then even there's some periods of time where you would check in with me and say, hey, are you good? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Stop asking me. But in reality, I wasn't good. I wasn't good for whatever reason, whether it was me being triggered because I felt like there wasn't enough intimacy in the marriage. Me being triggered because I felt like our finances weren't right, and you may have swiped too much on the spending, and I told you not to swipe, and you swiped anyway. And so what I did is, as opposed to me actually sharing how I felt about it, I stonewalled, and I just didn't talk to you about it, and that most definitely didn't help our relationship. And then of course you like, dude, I know you're not okay. Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, because I'm working through it in my own head, but not being transparent enough to share with you how I think about something, how I feel about something, so that you will know exactly how I feel. And I feel horrible that went on. And especially when I'm like, let me just get through the routine of the day. Yeah. And so that impacted our relationship for a very long time, where we were just kind of going through the motions. Yeah. But now, if I feel something, I say something. Sometimes you don't be wanting me to say it all the time.
I'm like, whoo, all right, that's enough. Like, that's all I can take right now. Like, thank you, husband. I'm so glad that we are at a different time and space in life. Like, you just gonna hit me with all of that right now, And I am probably the total opposite. I am a verbal processor. I am you leave my emotions out there. There's not going to be any question how LaTanya is feeling, because I'm going to say it, or truly my body language is going to be like, speak loud and clear. And I think I've even had to, over the years, even navigate some of that, because I know what I know about my husband is that he's not a confrontational person. It's not going to be any arguments, So I had to really learn a different method of communicating, because if I came at him, he was going to be like, I'm good, because I probably had I'm a come at you spirit. I probably am in recovery for that. But I knew that wasn't going to get him to talk or say anything to me. So then I went through a season of, I'm just not going to say anything. So then that's my like shutting down. If I'm now saying what's wrong, you're not saying it, you're not saying anything. Okay, fine. And I know you're not going to be confrontational with me about it. So then I'm just not going to say anything. And so that was like a journey that we really had to work through. And we were just talking the other day, like, how do we get through that? And I'm just gonna say, y'all, it wasn't nothing but the Lord. And like, not to like over spiritualize this or anything like that, but I just think if you gonna be for real out in these marriage streets, you better have the Lord with you.
Let me give a practical side about that answer, though. It was God, but and this is not a prideful boast of my own horn. This is actually a humility point, because I did a lot of introspection during those times, and when I'm praying about what's going on, God is saying, hey, do you trust me with this marriage? I'm like, yeah, I trust you. Okay. Then God is starting to talk back to me. So in the moments where I'm like praying about it, I'm not praying about, Lord, fix her. I'm saying, God, what is it about me? Like, why does this bother me so much? What am I supposed to do about this? Mm-hmm. And then that's when he's like, that's my daughter. And you're treating my daughter like I'm not okay with how you're treating my daughter. And I'm like, dang, okay. So now conviction starts to set in. And so now I'm starting to look at myself to say, what should I be doing? Like, I'm looking at you because I'm mad, because I'm counting the number of days the last time we were intimate. And so God was like, I thought I told you to love her unconditionally. I told you not to keep record of wrong. Like, even to the point where it's like, I'm like, Eugene, don't be keeping a tally sheet, whether it's physically or mentally. And so God is saying, that's not how I want you to look at her. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to deal with the lust that's on side of you, even if you think, and that's when I even discovered, like, wait, you can even lust after your wife if you're not looking at her from the standpoint of how God is looking at her, and then using the sexual intimacy that y'all have as a way to expressing how you feel and enhancing how you feel. Then you can do that. The same thing in your marriage. You can look at and objectify your wife in a way that's not healthy. And so it was like God was revealing all of those things to me as I was praying about how our relationship was. And so that caused me to say, all right, Eugene, you need to check yourself and stop. I think I'm shutting down because of something that she was doing, but really God was saying, you need to check yourself. Mm-hmm. And so part of that would then my heart was softened. And then and before, well, all of those things were causing me to turn away from her. Then that would cause me to turn back toward her. And then I had to figure out, okay, my communication style and how I've been watching people communicate as I grew up and what I learned about communication, that's not healthy, because there are really like some bad communication habits that we have. I mean, you could be a stuffer, a person that holds everything in. You can be a shouter where you just blurt it all out.
That's probably me at some point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you can be a person that interrupter, and I know that's me. And then you can be a person that just rambles on and on and on, or you can be a person that's an arguer. And if those are your your communication styles, I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but you really have to then take a pulse on your relationship to figure out, is that working for you? Is that working for her or him? And is that working for your relationship? Because, stress plays a part in that too, that causes you to be triggered and everything. And so I know that we're pushing, but I just want to say this one last point before we may have to go into a part two again.
Good stuff.
But the thing that you have to realize, that I think George Shaw said, that I think is a phenomenal quote, because all of this really comes down to communication, your style of communication and how you communicate. He said the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's actually taking place. That's crazy to me, because how many people are fighting and they're not getting to the root cause? Like, what's the issue when the issue is really not the issue? Like, you're fighting about, the socks on the floor, but really you're just irritated about the fact of, all of these other things that have piled up over time. And so I think that I had to really work on becoming a better communicator, so that when I've had some needs, wants, or feelings about something, and I wanted to work toward transparency, it was really about identifying who I am and communicating that to her, to Latanya, in a way, communicating that to you in a way that you would know who I am, and then you can have a communication or a conversation back with me based on how you thought about what I said, how it made you feel, and then you can also explain back to me who you are. And then that's when it was like all those light bulbs went off, and we were like, oh, okay, this is who you are, this is who I am, this is what I desire, this is what you desire. Now what can we both do about that to work together in oneness to walk this thing out? How can two walk together except they agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it all. You summed that up, pretty well. And it's true. And as we may talk about this again. We're gonna have to talk about this again. We will, because
I think that this
so
book
much
talks
here.
about it talks about the level of transparency, because that's really want to get to. And so I think that in the next episode we will really talk about what transparency looks like, and what do you have to do, because in order to continue to move toward transparency, because otherwise you will start to drift apart. And so I love the fact that they gave us many opportunities to check in during really this conference, and where you had activities, where you had questions, where you can really sit down and talk about what will cause you to drift apart.
Can I tell the funny, even during the conference?
Sure.
Like, I think it was probably Friday night or something. It was one of the check-ins. Now, maybe it was something on communication. And you said something. I don't even remember what the back and forth was that we had. And we had to kind of stop and say, because it was something about, I think, the way that I responded to something that you said, like literally while we sitting in this conference.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't talk about it. We didn't say anything right at that moment. But then we readdressed it and really said, like in that moment, I wasn't trying to disagree with you, but I was trying to say this.
Yeah, it was something that I took offense to, or something that she said. And, I can always tell when her voice get all high pitched and stuff. And so when her voice got high pitched, but it was her getting high pitched, but it was something that I said that triggered and caused that. And so as I'm sitting there in the conference listening I'm like, dang, I literally just did exactly what they talk about on the stage 5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago. It was
so
hilarious.
I had to literally apologize during the next break for what I had just done. But again, that's what I mean by not allowing the enemy to turn you away from your spouse, but being humble enough, even in the moment, to say, my bad, I did that wrong.
And I don't know if we would have had that exchange and vocalizing that, if we had not just learned that, so I think we will definitely have to go deeper in this, because there were so many things and so much great takeaways, and I think a couple of the things that I took away, as we're wrapping up, so maybe you can throw out your one or two things that you took away with you.
I'm gonna keep on talking, because I think honestly we're gonna transition, because I think that the one or two things that we gonna take away are the things that we gonna talk about in this next episode. Because listen, y'all. Let me just say this too. What we just gave to y'all, the conference was Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. What we just talked to you about is the first 40 minutes of Friday night.
That is true.
We haven't even gotten to what we talked about all day on Saturday, which was really God's model for our marriage. And so we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. And so we're already probably almost 40 minutes into this episode. But it's, as you can see, we're passionate. We're excited about it. And we can't wait to come back and talk to y'all a little bit more about what God has done for us through this conference. Absolutely. And how we just didn't want to keep it to ourselves and want to share it with you.
Well, I think maybe we can end on this.
Sure.
We can are we doing questions today?
Oh yeah, let's do questions.
Okay. So let me just end on this, because I think it sums up this part of it, that marriage is hard, but it's worth it.
Marriage is hard, but it's worth it.
That was a t-shirt that weekend. And I was like, it's so true. It is hard work. We not gonna ever tell you that marriage is easy and it's gonna make life easy, because and if somebody tell you that, that's a lie, and don't listen to them. They not operating in nobody's spirit but their own. Or if they tell you that it's hard and it's not worth it, don't listen to them either.
That's the enemy for sure.
That's the enemy for sure. But it's worth it. It's worth the hard work to do life together, because that's what God has intended us to do. And so that's what I think I can walk away with. And it just, my heart was softened and lightened by the time we had left that weekend. So,
Amen. Well, we got so much more to share.
We do.
We're going to make a part 2 to this episode 8, and we will be sharing it very soon.
Okay, you want me to do my rapid fire question?
Let's go.
Okay. What is an adventure you would love for us to do together?
So here's the thing. So I want to go to Africa so bad. And in my brain, I have been wanting to do an African safari. But sometimes I spend a little time on TikTok.
A little.
And so I just, a little, be quiet. And so the last couple of days, I done seen an elephant attack a safari truck. I done seen like so many things happen that I'm like, I don't know, bro. I think I might be passing on this safari in Africa, because that all of a sudden don't seem so fun to me no more. But I really sincerely want to go and spend time. I mean, I've even looked at, buying houses in Ghana. Like, I'm just saying, it's just something that, I would love to just be able to go and share and travel and, experience.
That's a good one. I would agree with that.
How about you?
Travel. I think we've talked about getting in a camper and driving. I'm not going to say, I don't know how far I'm going to drive.
Yeah,
that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to ride. I ain't going to say like a whole lot of cross country.
How about we just do the train from Chicago to
to California?
California.
That could work.
I ain't driving no camper all the way over there by myself, because you're not driving the camper.
I would drive a little bit.
You're not driving the camper.
But a cross country adventure.
Yeah, I like that train idea.
Yeah.
But again, I know you'll take the train there, but I'm positive.
Let me tell you what I'm not gonna do. Yeah. I'm not gonna get on that train.
I'm not gonna tell the people how you wouldn't even drive back from North Carolina.
That was like 30 years ago.
And you made me drive back by myself.
He didn't drive back by himself.
Y'all?
He wasn't by
myself.
He was with my parents.
Well, this has been great. It's gone a little bit longer, but we're excited. Thank y'all for coming and hanging out with us. Please like, share, subscribe. Again, this may not even be, I pray that it has blessed you, but there's so much more and so many more people out there that needs to hear more about positive images of God's ordained marriages. Yes. So please like, share, leave a comment, because these algorithms, they like those things. But anyway, we appreciate y'all.
Yes.
Thank y'all for tuning in to this episode of The Winning Team. And we will see y'all soon. Peace.